Moving away from the news and getting into some of what's happening now. So we saw over the past few days some videos surfacing once again highlighting disturbing situation within our schools, and of course that has to do with bullying, has to do with school violence and that sort of thing. So to give us a perspective on what's been happening, what's the latest, we are being joined by the Tobago Officer for Tutor, and that is Mr. Bradon Roberts. Good morning and welcome to you, sir. Mr. Roberts, how are you doing?
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to your set.
All right, great. So, I mean, first of all, like one of the videos that we saw in the last few days was that of a teacher fending off some other students, and he had a broomstick in his hand, and there was some concern that he might have been suspended. Do you have any information with us concern about that situation?
Right, so there is no evidence of any suspension. I've seen that being floating around and so on. I have seen and heard persons in authority commending the teacher. However, I don't want us to be lost either in the suspension or in the commending the teacher for his intervention. These children need to behave.
Yeah.
We need to have things in place to prevent these behaviors. And unfortunately, we have, over the years, as the behavior becomes more deviant, sensationalize it when it happens, and then we forget about it, especially now where there are all other things to talk about, so we may talk about it now. The children may be suspended. I think the children were suspended. Probably 2-3 weeks, if so much, and we move on to the next. We have children who are struggling to contain themselves. A lot of these children are lost, and when we don't attend to them, they act out. And we have nothing in Trinidad and Tobago. I've heard them speaking about MILAT, but that is after school. There is nothing for a primary school child who has psychological issues that there's any center, there's any particular space that they can be treated. So we have them in one primary school, and they give trouble, we transfer them to another primary school. We assign social workers and guidance officers who may spend, an hour a week, who may spend a couple of minutes with that child when they go back to the same environment that have them lost. So we talk about the fights and the teachers and what could teachers do, but we're not stopping the cause. We're not addressing the cause of the problem. So it's not to see what happens at the end, you know. We need to get deeper into the matter. I know that it would be a costly thing, and the business people may not see returns on their investment. However, we will pay for it in the end when we don't treat it at the beginning.
With crime and so on.
Sure.
But this situation also highlights just the challenges teachers face, specifically when they encounter situations like that and trying to figure out what is the best move. Do we just let the children be? Do we get involved and potentially risk physical harm and, you know, all of these things? So what is our teacher's position? What is the tutor's stance on the teacher's position when a situation like this happens?
Right, so teachers are thrown in the ocean and are asked to swim, float, whatever you do, don't allow the children to kill themselves. That's where teachers are. You see, this happens when persons who are policymakers who don't understand what's happening at the ground make decisions. So we have all the children rights, we have the abolishment of the corporal punishment. They made all these policies without putting anything in place for the child who cannot contain themselves. As a teacher, there's a very thin line between helping and hurting. So you may be trying to prevent something from happening, but in grabbing or pushing, you may damage somebody. It is then the teacher who would be looked at and scrutinized. We have the security officers, the MTS officers and so on, who are hesitant also in intervening, because if anything goes wrong in their intervention, it's their job would be at risk. A child at most, well, unless it's really bad, it will be expelled, but we try to avoid that. At most, they are suspended for a week or two, and they come back. They give no end of worries. So teachers, we give the guidance as, you cannot leave a child. You should not leave a child as an adult. Leave children to slug out, to go at each other, because you are fearful of what an intervention could result in. So you exercise great caution as best as is possible. But I want to move beyond the advice for a teacher because it's actually, we're hoping that nothing goes wrong when they intervene.
Yes.
We want the Division of Education, who has authority in Tobago here. If we are doing all these TDA, that is the Tobago District Assessment, and all these assessments and all these reports and all this data collection, if there's one thing we do well in Trinidad and Tobago is collect data. But what we do with the data, I really don't know why we stress out persons to get all this data and do nothing with it. So if we have these students who we know they're not reading properly, they're not doing good in their arithmetic, what are we putting in place for them so at least they are attentive to something other than being frustrated and putting out their frustration on other children and on teachers, because some of them are very disrespectful to teachers. These children who are given all this trouble in primary school, they go to secondary school with no kind of reporting to the secondary school as to this is the challenge that this child has. When interacting with this child and your provisions for this child, be mindful of these things. There is seldom that. There was this blue card that they call the cumulative card. That has been out of existence for some time. I believe it's up 2 to 3 years now. They have been trying to get that card printed. But however, when that card transfers to the secondary school, very little could be used out of it to see what you are going to do at the secondary school level.
And what was the blue card? What was the specifics of the blue card?
Well, that gives the recording of the child. So the grades that they would have gotten over the years, the teacher's comments, which would be minimal, what overall comment they would have. And that would go with the child when they go to their secondary school. How much use it would have been for the secondary school, I cannot say. My deepest concern, though, it's schools like Mason Hall and Roxborough and to an extent Signal Hill Secondary, where they send a number of the under 30%. Now, if you are sending a certain grouping of students to a particular school, it's because that particular school have a program for them. You have Mason Hall Secondary School who have a lot of gang activity within the school. So it's very often they're having fights. The teachers are very concerned about it. Ever so often you hear police going up there. You're hearing who in 6 and who in 7 in school. I went to a workshop with principals and the topic was managing trauma in education. Trauma in education? And we as leaders, we're talking about it only when a fight occurs, which it is disheartening. We have the secretary to me who is sitting on the answer. You're talking about the Tobago-centric thing. There are some children, no matter how you change around to teach them fractions, it's not to them to sit down steady in a classroom and just learn it by rote. So there are different things we need to incorporate for children to have a better understanding of their schoolwork and how it applies to real life. But this Tobago-centric thing, just as in planning stage forever, I don't know when we will get an implementation of it. Tutor has played limited role based on the invitation to play a role. But if we don't do anything different for the children, we're going to continue getting what we're getting. And to see what teachers could do, there is not an answer for that. There isn't an answer for that because we have taken away all the rights from our schools. And to some extent, we've taken away the rights from the parents. Because as a parent, if you're disciplining a child and by some means you cause any harm, you have to respond to the police officers who will be coming to investigate this abuse. So you can't talk stern to a child because that's verbal abuse. Of course, they talk about hitting and the physical abuse that is. So children are not fearful anymore. I went to one school where a police officer came in to do an intervention with 2 children who were bullying another child. And these children have a smile on their face. They have no fear anymore because they know nothing happens to them. So the call really is at the policy stage. We need to have something done for those children, even from the primary school, who are not conforming to what the system has.
And as you mentioned in primary school, we had a situation last week come out into the public of a student threatening a teacher, saying that he's part of one of the gangs and so on. I mean, how is tutor, handling these reports too? Like when that comes in terms of ensuring teachers have some support. Is there any support that can be given from a tutor perspective? Give us your thoughts on these things.
Right. So even at my school visits, or even when these teachers call, I would give them the advice as to how to go about reporting. how to go about the counseling, how to go about it within your response. Because a teacher has to maintain calm. If you lose calm, then you will not be able to help any child in a situation like that. So we ensure that we do the reporting to this division. The school supervisors are aware of it, first of all, so that something doesn't happen and the division would see they weren't aware that that's what it was. And how you encourage the child, how you have the parents involved in the particular matter. The challenge though is some of the children who were giving us trouble in the last 10 years are no parents. So when you send for the parents, is some of those same characters that would be coming to meet you to have that conversation about the child. So we talk about, you know, that maintain that emotional balance to be able to see your best way of navigating the situation. Teachers have been trying other ways of discipline. I have been advising against that. This disciplinary matrix thing is just a farce. When these children are giving troubles, send them to the principal. Let the principal deal with that. So I know the principals or our members will not be pleased with my comment, but then the principal will do the necessary reporting to the division, and that is how we have to work with that, because any form of discipline that anyone could perceive as some form of abuse, the teacher is the one who would then have to answer to all these set of questions and all the ridicule, because all it takes is one social media person who have no information go out there and spread all sorts of rumors about our teachers and our members. So we advise our teachers to be cautious. Yes, you will need to intervene, but we need the support from the division. We need the support from the ministry, because I think Trinidad also don't have things in place for our students who are not doing well. So that's where the call has always been. And I'm not seeing, even on the campaign speeches now, if you listen, you're not hearing persons talking about education, what they intend to do for education. I mean, 90% of their speeches are on what the other party is doing, and so I don't know where the hope really comes from to dealing with our young minds who are going off course.
And of course, this also speaks to a wider societal problem, because, you know, back, let's say, when we were growing up and so on, there was still corporal punishment. There was still writing the lines, you do something, go run some laps and so on. But now you can't tell a child that.
Well, you see, I am not so much against removing those things, you know. We have to replace it with something. And there is a positive side of discipline. So you could positively have that moral education, but it has to be in something that interests them. A child who is not accustomed to doing well in school, you can't call a child to be interested in any maths, anything, any social studies, anything, because they're not accustomed to that. That's not a fun time for them. So we need from very early, we be consistent with the moral education, but there must be supporting activities to keep their interest.
What kind of supporting activities would help?
Right, so we have the like for the football. Football is only during football time, but football have a lot of maths in it. So you have where the coach will say, get into groups of 5, get into groups of 3, and these children enjoy that. But that's multiplication. It's repeated addition. You could do subtraction. There are different things you could do infused in all those other activities. So we tell our children, don't run. But replace it with what? What do they do at break time? So when they don't run, what else do they do? There are number games that you can play. Look at things in the environment that could give you 5. What fruits could give you 5? What package of anything? So you're encouraging them to explore numbers. Then maths become easy. What in the languages? So we want to introduce Spanish in the primary school, but it's only the standard 5 teachers sometimes after SE who will do some verbal with those children. But encourage them in a one sentence. You learn that for about a week or so. The good morning, the infuse things that the children need, they could apply to their daily living throughout the days. So you keep their interest in something positive. You reward these children at the different levels. So different things that they engage in, you make sure that they get that attention. The improvements of such, you reward those. Student council. Giving those children that sense of responsibility for these particular activities in your school helps to build that character that we want to build. I don't know that many of our schools have a student council, especially primary schools. Some of the secondary schools do. But there are positive things that we need to do to keep them positively engaged. When they are not positively engaged, they look for the little fights because they get attention there. Those children who don't do well in maths, they will get attention when they give trouble. They will not get attention in anything to do with schoolwork because that's not their strength. So we need to infuse the things that they do in their daily life with the work and not just have maths at maths time and spelling at spelling time and everything so segmented where they're not doing well. So I really hope that even if it's not a Tobago-centric something, but somewhere schools have a project-based approach, a thematic approach. So I think I heard the Chief Secretary talking about building tourism. Which schools in Tobago have a tourism focus? Are we hoping that when they leave school, they will like tourism? We need to include tourism even in the primary school maths. So instead of picking a sum from the textbook, teachers would be able to recreate the math problems using aspects of tourism. So children, outside of learning the maths only, they're hearing the narrative around tourism, the character need around tourism, the effects of our poor conduct on tourism, the mannerisms that we would want to learn. Those things would come out in your maths, your vocabulary, creative writing, the secondary school subjects as well. But schools don't have that focus. So the secondary school math teacher does his job or her job during his period of time, and those children go to another class where that teacher does what they have to do during that period of time, and there is no cohesiveness. And that's where the policies, the resources need to come in to give schools that particular focus so that we don't have children continuously slipping through the cracks.
What about in terms of support for teachers as, we're going through this period? Because as you speak to a policy change that needs to happen. And unfortunately, we know these things do not happen overnight. Even if that's a trajectory of whichever government is in play, for whatever reason, it takes a long time. But in the meantime, there is all of these challenges our teachers are facing, especially with dealing with these troubled children. What kind of support would you like, whether it's from the ministry, the society, private sector? What would the teachers like to be able to have the best approach to deal with these kids?
So I like your question, and I'm going back to the cause. We don't want to make the environment toxic and then see what support teachers will get. We need to minimize the level of toxicity in our schools. I will say this much. Teachers are also frustrated with one another.
Yes.
So there are a lot of conflict among teachers and principal. I spend most of my time doing mediation. I visit a number of schools to deal with that conflict among the teaching staff and so on. They have the elders and associates where they do the employee assistance program where they have counseling and so on. But I do not believe most of the teachers take up that counseling. Persons believe when you go to counseling is because you have mental issues or some, but it's more than that. So there's a little stigma towards going to counseling. However, the supported teachers gave the teachers what they work for. So those have their outstanding increments and their gratuity because they have their problems, And we believe that they're supposed to drop all those things and be their best for the students. So all those outstanding gratuity now will be coming very hard at the divisions shortly. Because about 10 million plus they have for our contract teachers. Not the increments, that's just contract teachers. We have the outstanding increments as well. So give them what they have worked for to start with. Then there are some things that add to the toxicity of our schools. We need to have those things resolved. We have guidance officers and social workers who are under-resourced. So they can't really help to the capacity that we want. So the environment needs to be addressed where those things are concerned, bringing toxicity. And the teachers are human beings with family and have expenses. So the monies that they are owing teachers, I just do not want to raise it too much in this political period for them to say it's politics. But as soon as this period passes, I will be coming very seriously regarding the outstanding monies that they have for teachers. So support, there are structures in place, they are not being efficiently utilized, especially with the support system of the school guidance officers and so on. The finances owed to our teachers, the programs for the children who are not doing well. And we made a major mistake in removing remedial teachers from school, So the children who are not able to read it don't have that time where they will go to a remedial teacher, spend about an hour, help with a little bit of their reading, they would have replaced that with instructional coaches. And I know that that grouping of persons don't like me talking about it either. I don't know what the benefits are, because the belief is if I help the teachers plan better, they will be able to reach all the children. The gap is wide with a number of those children. I don't know that what better planning will cater for all of them. Some of them need special attention. So there are basic things that the division needs to address. I know it will be costly and they're talking about funding and so on, but we're going to pay for it one way or the other. So support for teachers, you fix the social ills in terms of the schools and all the challenges psychological that these children have. Cater for them, because we cannot just expel these children. They need to be addressed in terms of their mental well-being and so on, and all that the teachers would have worked for. We're not begging for additions. What they would have worked for, you give them that, and they would be able to manage, because they're spending the little money that they have now to buy the resources that they're not sending to the school. So these are the conversations I would want to hear from aspiring leaders. How are we going to fix this problem? Because we're going to continue to have the crime rate if we don't fix the education system.
And that's where we're going to just have to end things on that very salient point, Mr. Roberts. I want to thank you so much for being on with us and for giving us a perspective on what's going on with our children, especially where our troubled children are concerned and the challenges that teachers face. So thank you. And of course, thank you so much for the work that you do in our schools. I know it's not easy.
Yeah, and I do hope that the powers that be do listen.
Yes.
They need to listen and act on it. So thanks again for having me on your platform.
Certainly. All right, viewers. Well, we're going to go for a quick break, but we'll be back right after this.
It's a brand new morning.